Today's episode is brought to you by Powbox, the easiest way to make your practice email HIPAA compliant. It works with the Gmail or Outlook account you already use, and your clients never have to log into a portal to read your messages. Get $250 off an annual plan with promo code MODERN.
When the session ends, the admin begins. From progress notes to insurance claims, managing a practice takes time. Simple Practice is the all-in-one EHR built specifically for therapists to streamline your workflow and give you your hours back.
Start with a 7-day free trial, then get 50% off your first 3 months. Just go to simplepractice.com. The Conversion Therapy Survivor Network, or CTSN, is a survivor-led nonprofit supporting people harmed by conversion therapy. CTSN provides survivor support groups, education, and resources for affirming mental health professionals. Learn more or support the mission at conversionsurvivor.org.
You're listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide, where therapists live, breathe, and practice as human beings. To support you as a whole person and a therapist, here are your hosts, Curt and Katie Vernoy.
Welcome back, Modern Therapists. This is the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. I'm Curt with Katie Vernoy, and this is the podcast for therapists about the things that go on in our practices, the things that go on in our world. We are capping off a month of talking about Pride, about supporting our LGBTQ plus community. We are fresh off of last week's episode where we were talking about the Chiles versus Salazar decision and the way that that is going to have impacts across our profession. And I am so grateful to be welcoming back Samuel Nieves to be able to help us further on this conversation. One of the things that I dropped into last week's episode is that therapists might want to consider getting more up to date, more trained on how to work with people who've been traumatized by SOGIECE and SOGIE. And we're going to talk about all of that, as well as just kind of what Samuel's been up to over the last couple of months since he last joined us. So thank you so much for joining us again today.
Thank you so much. A pleasure to be here.
Thank you for coming back on the podcast. We had planned to put out our interview this month, and they dropped the decision early. So we dropped our episode early, and it's just such, I guess, sad place, but also a grateful place that we come to this to find out what's been going on for you and for your organization in the fallout of that decision. But before we get started, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to folks who maybe didn't listen to the old episode. We'll link to that one in our show notes over to mtsgpodcast.com. But if you can let the folks on this episode know, who are you and what you're putting out into the world?
Thank you so much. Yeah, my name's Samuel Nieves, he, they pronouns. I am a board member and also survivor of conversion therapy. The organization I'm a part of is called Conversion Therapy Survivor Network. It's a 501c3 nonprofit nationally, but we actually kind of have a surprising worldwide reach, which has been, I guess, not too surprising. We host a weekly support group. And so I use my clinical training. I'm not currently licensed, but I was trained as a marriage and family therapist. And so from that lens, I attend our weekly support group, and we just make space for survivors of conversion therapy to talk. And I guess it shouldn't be surprising, but when the therapy room happens to be the place where some of your most significant trauma happened, it's kind of hard to go back into the therapy room. So the support group that our organization offers, at least for me, has been life-changing. That's why I decided to not just volunteer, but get on the board, because it's so important. So that's what I do. I'm on TikTok, I advocate, and we focus on supporting survivors of conversion therapy.
When the Chiles decision came down, you ran an emergency support group that day and brought people together. I know it's been a couple of months, and we're going to talk about what's been happening in the community at large over the last couple of months, but what do you remember from that day? What did you see clinically? What were people experiencing?
Yeah, it was rough. It was a bad day. It was a bad week. And honestly, it was kind of a bad month after that. Things have kind of gotten back to the regular awfulness, but it was particularly bad. Unsurprisingly, the most common thing I heard was, I feel numb to everything. And also, I feel like I'm back in conversion therapy. And it makes sense. And I was actually kind of worried that we weren't doing it because while there was a request for it and I did think it was needed, I couldn't help but remember a study about how debriefing after a traumatic event can potentially increase symptoms of PTSD. But it was pretty clear to me that it was the right choice because we were responding to a re-traumatizing, not a traumatizing event, right? Because when people, especially the public, talk about Chiles v. Salazar, they're very much talking about the emotional impact, about the confusion of what it means, and making it a catastrophe, right? Or a lot of people will come and validate, hey, yeah, conversion therapy should be a thing. We need to fix these broken people. And so, no matter what you're hearing, it's very, very rare when you hear someone who's like a lawyer from the Trevor Project or National Center for LGBTQ Rights setting the record straight and saying what the implication actually is. And so, yeah, it does not just feel like you're back in conversion therapy. You're literally hearing the same rhetoric. And so it's very hard to push against that. So if you have a very tough session with your client where they are absolutely re-traumatized and absolutely re-experiencing their triggers, that's what the meeting was all over. And for the rest of the week, it was just trying to be in community with each other because we were all feeling it and dealing in the myriad of ways people deal with their PTSD.
So there's two elements that it feels like would be relevant for your experience of that day, that week, that month. And it seems like there's the clinical or facilitator elements of running those support groups, and then also that of a survivor. And so what are the things that therapists should know if they're entering in a similar situation where there's crisis response, potentially support groups, that kind of stuff, as far as how to take care of themselves as facilitators, but also what the experience might be for those who are joining the support groups for needed community?
Yeah, and I would always defer to your clinical judgment. Your relationship with your client is definitely something that you know better than I do. But when you're thinking about conversion therapy survivors in general, I think it's important to remember that these are people who quite often lifelong, but if nothing else, very specifically in a short period of time, had an intense training of learned helplessness and self distrust, right? We've been taught not to believe our own body sensations, our own natural inclinations, our own judgment, our own feelings. And so, honestly, while it might be counterintuitive, sometimes we need a really healthy dose of realism after we've been validated because we already know how to catastrophize and feel this sense of helplessness because that's the way we've survived our trauma so that we don't get hurt again. Already be like, yep, I know I'm broken, okay, let's move on, I'm trying, right? And so it can be really helpful to make space for that trauma, and as soon as you see an ounce of, okay, cool, let's lean into your strengths, let's lean into the realism here. You've survived. How do we get those tools to help you survive again? Because it makes sense that you're re traumatized. It absolutely does. What can we do so that you can survive the rest of the day, the rest of the week, until your next session of support group, right? Like I think that is why I'm naturally inclined to solution focused and ACT because the problem's there, right? We know it. We see it every single day. We deal with it. What we need is to find some way to access the strengths that helped us survive conversion therapy and really focus on that as long as it doesn't invalidate the person, right? Like if they're not ready to lean into that yet, obviously, use your clinical judgment, but as soon as you can, let's run right into those strengths because that is something that we need.
Quick question for therapists listening. Do you use Gmail or Outlook for client communication? Here's something most therapists don't realize. Even with a business or workspace account, Gmail and Outlook aren't fully HIPAA compliant. That gap is on you to fix. That's where Powbox comes in. Powbox automatically encrypts every email you send, and your clients read it right at their inbox. No portals, no passwords, no extra steps. It works with the Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 accounts you already have, so nothing about your day-to-day changes.
Setup takes minutes, there's no training required, and Powbox's US-based support team is there if you need them. Listeners of Modern Therapist Survival Guide get $250 off an annual plan. Visit powbox.com, that's PAUBOX, and use promo code MODERN.
There's a lot of our audience that probably has conversion therapy survivors on their caseloads and may or may not know it. And what are things that those therapists should be watching for that they might miss? And what are some things that well-meaning therapists might miss the mark on as this part of a client's history is coming out? I'm trailing off.
Yeah. No, that's good. I'm having like it's hard because there's so many things that I've noticed over the years. But what came to mind was please remember that. I mean, it's even in our conversion therapy survivor community flag. Memory loss is huge, right? There are so many people who had to forget that they were queer in order to survive, right? And so there's a lot of their experiences that they're probably going to tell you happened, and they're only giving you what they can remember right now with what their healing has allowed them to remember. So if their story changes, or if you think, I'm not so sure that fits with the rest of their story, or I don't know what to think, that's normal. That's okay, right? A lot of memories can come flooding back. High level of trauma, use your training for PTSD and for sexual violence training. I would say also remember that we might be highly resistant to you challenging us, right? Because with that whole like we've internalized that helplessness and distrust. And so if we feel like you're challenging our sense of reality and we're trying hard to like validate that sense of reality, it could be repeating what happened in conversion therapy. And so I know I just said like, challenge us to lean into our strengths. That's after you've clearly gained a sense of we're ready for that, and you can tell that you're not challenging us. You're even saying, hey, I wonder if I can call out something I'm seeing and I could be wrong here, but am I seeing this? How's this feel for you, right? Really lean into that curiosity, rather than those hard challenges that sometimes might be helpful. For us, I would say usually that's not a great thing. We usually need to have that validation of you can trust yourself, and I wonder if this is something that might be going on for you. Is that correct?
It seems like there's a lot of care and caution that needs to be happening at this time. There's a lot of confusion, in fact, on what actually is going on, and I think there's a few different challenges. There's understanding what actually happened, and we talked a little bit about that in the episode on the ruling, but there's also the impacts of what people think happened and is happening. And so what are you seeing happen with the conversation in the public arena around this, and how is that impacting survivors right now? Because some people think, okay, well, now conversion therapy is legalized, and that's not what happened. We've talked about that. You can listen to that episode that we'll link to in the show notes. But it
Yeah.
seems like there's a permission given in the public space that feels really harmful.
Absolutely. I have had to set, at least for myself, very clear boundaries. I've been surprised at how much I cannot go online anymore. And unless I'm in the mental headspace of, all right, I got my advocacy hat on, strength based, I got this. It's a precarious place to be online, and we are reminding each other to set up our personal boundaries. It sucks because for a lot of us, chosen family is all we have, and how we find them is online. It stinks because if you find any type of post or commentary about queer rights in any way, shape, or form, you're likely going to see conversion therapy rhetoric there, especially if it's anti-trans. I often do say, not every instance of homophobia or transphobia is SOGIECE, sexual orientation or gender identity or expression change efforts. But gosh, especially today, they are often the same. It's really hard to parse out when they're not the same, because usually they very much are now. They've been given permission to do that. So, yeah, the public absolutely has been given carte blanche to say that we're broken, that it's a mental health disease, that we need to go to therapy. Yeah, and so I honestly can't go online a lot of times unless I'm in that specific headspace, and it's unfortunately the same for many of our survivors. That's just the reality of it.
What are you hearing, or if you're also comfortable in sharing your own experiences as this carte blanche comes up? As you're talking about not being able to go into the online space, is there, I guess, fear that this is something that is going to be, continuing to lead to something beyond the narrower decision that we talked about in our episode last week? But is this feeling like it is step one of several coming?
When I first left conversion therapy, I had to do a lot of things to enter the real world, but one of the things that I watched was V for Vendetta, and I can tell you that scene where the queer couple is put into a concentration camp for being queer, and then I learned that that actually did happen during World War II. I had this sense that if my conversion therapy was given carte blanche, they would go straight towards that again. So for me, does it feel like that? Sometimes. And for a lot of survivors, especially those who don't have support, absolutely, their fear will take them there because we know what that's like. We know what that type of world looks like because we've survived it, and some of us barely, right? I will say though, for people who typically have support, those fears aren't necessarily where we go. It's more just it's a lot harder to manage our triggers. You can go to therapy, you can go to support groups, and it can be so hard to be like, all right, I'm not broken. I know myself. I trust myself. And it doesn't matter how much strength you have when you go into a toxic radioactive environment, there's still only so much radiation you can get until it seeps into an unhealthy level, and you have to remove yourself. You can try to power through it, but there's a limit, right? Before those triggers start triggering. And it does feel like you're back in conversion therapy. So I would say for me, the thing that we're dealing with because of Chiles v. Salazar is that we're trying to remind each other, I know that it was hard before and it maybe even looked like you were getting some healing and now it feels like you're regressing. But you got to have those boundaries of am I starting to feel activated? Okay, now is the time. I absolutely have to do those grounding things. I have to be vigilant about it because I can't just assume that it's things as normal anymore. I have to be careful that as soon as I feel activated, I need to ground because it's those triggers that are now being activated over and over and over again. And our families are who are not supportive are very much being given the language to put us right back into conversion therapy. And so for those of us who are survivors who do still have some connections to their families, the majority of them are not supportive. And so it's now ramped up the pressure there too. So they can never get a break. And that's what a lot of survivors are dealing with.
Let's talk about why Curt and I both use Simple Practice. Simple Practice is an all-in-one EHR that is HIPAA compliant, high trust certified, and built specifically for therapists.
For me, it's the integrated client communication. Messages from clients land straight in the chart, so I'm not copying things over from 3 different apps or emails or trying to remember who said what where.
For me, one of the things that saved me gigantic headaches is insurance billing. It was simple back when I was in network, and it stayed just as simple now that I'm out of network doing courtesy billing for my clients. That used to be the thing I dreaded most, and now it just runs. And if you're just starting out or growing your practice, they also have a credentialing service that helps you get paneled independently.
It takes the total headache out of insurance enrollment, giving you full autonomy over your own contracts without any middleman platforms taking a cut.
If you're ready to simplify the business side of your practice, now's the perfect time to try Simple Practice.
Start with a 7-day free trial, then get 50% off your first 3 months. Just go to simplepractice.com to claim the offer. Again, that's simplepractice.com.
I think the thing that worried me the most, and it's from both what it means about a profession as well as what it means to survivors, is that this practice was reduced to speech. And what really struck me as you're talking is that if we're listening to what you're saying about these impacts and we're framing it as this is speech, the horrific little rhyme, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words would never hurt me, just comes to mind. And I think it can really invalidate the experience. And before we hit record, you reminded me and Curt that the World Health Organization has classified this as torture.
Mhm.
And it feels so invalidating that this is speech. And so I just wanted to reflect on that first, and maybe you can add your discussion on the impacts of this. We have a whole episode with you on that, but I think it fits here because this has been reduced to speech, and it's not, it's torture.
Yeah. I was in Washington, D.C. Last year, we had enough donors that we were able to take our board members and some of our volunteers and go to the Supreme Court when Chiles v. Salazar was being argued. And we did submit an amicus brief, and our words were heard. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson did reference one of the people in her amicus brief in her dissent, right? So I have all of this knowledge logically, right?
Yeah.
And I've talked with NCLR, the National Center for LGBTQ Rights. I was in a meeting with the Trevor Project, right? Like I have all of this experience of people saying, we got your back. I've been on podcasts. I've had people reach out to me in DM saying, thank you for your work. I feel so much better. I feel supported. Of all people, I feel like I should be one of the strongest survivors who's got this, who can take the hits, who can keep going. And I couldn't listen to those arguments. I couldn't.
Yeah.
It was too re-traumatizing because I was hearing the same rhetoric that I heard from every conversion therapist that I had, every pastor, every family member. Like there's just a limit, you know? And so, you know, the neurons that fire together wire together, and those neurons are still there. And you can definitely lean into your strengths, and you can temper those so that they aren't activated as much, right? And I've done a lot of work on that, obviously, from what I just described. But humans got their limit, you know,
Yeah.
and right now we're a lot of us are hitting our limits. And I think that is the part that is absolutely being missed in their conversation, is that for survivors who aren't lawyers or have access to talk to lawyers or have access to know how to advocate for themselves, it's the implication that is so damaging right now. Because the implication is you should go back to conversion therapy because it didn't work and you didn't try hard enough. And I can tell you, what we're talking about is the number one struggle that survivors of conversion therapy first have to overcome the second I start working with them. Because someone told them something and they realized, I think what I went through might be conversion therapy. And I'm not sure because I have all these, images of electroshock therapy, and that's what I think conversion therapy is, right? But gosh, when I hear more stories from conversion therapy survivors, something feels uncomfortable. And I think this might be my experience too. And they have this huge imposter syndrome because it was just talk. They just told me, you just need to change. My parents were just, you just need to date more girls, right? Like it was just talk. But when speech is the words that are used to harm the most critical part of yourself that you absolutely cannot change no matter how hard you try and is called torture, yeah, words do hurt.
You have been meeting with Trevor Project, NCLR, National Center for LGBTQ plus rights. What is the what are the organizations telling survivors? What are they suggesting survivor serving clinicians to do right now? Because I'm sitting here being an awkward ally. I'm sitting here just trying to be not harmful in all of this and feeling just the absolute stuckness of everything. And I'm sure that there's a lot of our audience in the same space. Obviously, making the space for this, but what should we be doing?
Thank you so much. I think for allies who want to get involved, I think there's just two really important things to do. Know what SOGIECE is: sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, change efforts. That is the umbrella term that you can find in the research. It's an umbrella term for conversion therapy, right? And if you can just know that term, if you can spot it, if you can call it out, then you potentially can be giving a survivor of conversion therapy the freedom and the validation to finally give it a voice. This is why it hurts so much. Oh my gosh. It wasn't just words. It was torture. Okay, that makes sense. Now let's lean into these emotions. It brings up other things, right? And for some survivors, they're not ready for that, right? They don't want to call themselves a survivor because that means there was something that was so damaging. I had to survive it, and I have to acknowledge I was in literally proximity with people who aren't here anymore because they didn't survive, right? And that might be too much for them. But for some people, just being able to spot it and cautiously be like, do you think this might have been conversion therapy? Because I heard this podcast and they were saying, it's just an attempt to change your expression or change your identity. And that's under the umbrella of conversion therapy. Do you think this fits? Right? That can be life changing. So absolutely feel empowered with that language. Use it, look for it, carry that lens. That alone can be super, super helpful. And the other is just know that Conversion Therapy Survivor Network exists that you can refer people to. And on the call with the Trevor Project, when I asked them, what can we do for survivors? One of the leaders, who's a lawyer for the Trevor Project, said, hey, I know that we target minors. I know that we target our call center is for youth and we clarify, 25 and under. But if you're a 40-year-old conversion therapy survivor and you need support, we will not hang up on you. You call us. We are a crisis line for a reason. So the Trevor Project is there even if you're not a youth. Conversion Therapy Survivor Network is there for you. Born Perfect is there for you, right? So there are organizations, and it sucks when you need support right now. But if you want to give to those organizations, if you want to read about those organizations, if you want to read a book, there's this amazing book called Shame, Sex, Attraction. It's a play on the same sex attraction, right? I love it. Shame, Sex, Attraction, the very first chapter goes into this really in-depth history of conversion therapy, modern, and what it looks like. An amazing chapter, well annotated, like 50 sources just in that first chapter. And then the rest of the book is people sharing what it was like and actually telling their stories. A second book is coming out. A third book is coming out, and we've been asked to share our stories. So we're participating in that. And then there's another book, amazing, that just came out called Conversion Therapy Dropout Network, where you can read about someone who was in the like changed movement and Exodus movement and what it was like to be closeted, knowing that it wasn't working, and then have to come out yourself. So you absolutely, if you want to read books, there's some books for you. If you want to give money, there's the organizations for you. But if nothing else, just start seeing it. And don't underestimate the power of validating a survivor, because they probably have a very long history of invalidating everything about themselves, and you validating it for them. I tell you, the first time a therapist heard I was in conversion therapy and was like, well, I don't know, conversion therapy, so who knows? Maybe that's what I'm dealing with, right? Not thinking anything about it because it's just my life. When she paused and she like had to compose herself and say, okay, thank you for disclosing that. And she treated it like I had just told her I had been through torture. Oh shoot, it was, right? That gave me permission to treat it the way it deserved to be treated. And no one had done that for me before. So that's incredibly empowering. Just know that you can see it and validate it for other people. That's actually really helpful.
The Conversion Therapy Survivor Network, or CTSN, is a survivor-led nonprofit supporting people who've been harmed by conversion therapy and other forms of conversion practices. Many survivors were told that their LGBTQ plus identity is something broken, sinful, or wrong they needed to suppress in order to be loved, accepted, or even physically safe. And for many CT survivors, those messages continue long after the therapy itself ends. Conversion Therapy Survivor Network exists to remind survivors that they are not alone.
They host weekly survivor support groups, share survivor stories publicly to raise awareness, and work to educate therapists and mental health professionals about the lasting impact conversion therapy can have. If you're a therapist listening to this podcast, your affirming care could genuinely change or even save someone's life. You can learn more, support the mission, or access resources at conversionsurvivor.org. Many conversion therapy survivors were harmed by licensed clinicians, some who are still practicing. What do you think the profession owes survivors right now?
Yeah. I mean, if I were to wave a magic wand and and all therapists in the world were to tailor conversion therapy survivors, I would say um, survivors would call on their licensing boards and their organizations that they're part of to make it super easy to report our conversion therapists. Right now, it's incredibly difficult. The only way we tend to win our cases in court is by using false advertising, right? And we have to find some way to prove, well, they told me I could be straight and it doesn't work. So false advertising, right? Like that's been one of the few ways we can win our court cases, right? And so you have to rely on them being bold enough to actually say what they're trying to do rather than, well, I mean, we just want you to lean into your identity as a child of God. That's all we're doing, you know? And then it's not as blatant. Um, and I would say that really is it. Use what we just talked about. You know, when you talk about a Christian counselor, there are some Christian counselors who are pretty amazing, where they do lean into like, hey, maybe you're a queer Christian, or maybe you're not queer. I don't know. Let's make space for all of it. I'm not going to have a predetermined outcome for you, right? And it's not a challenge to their faith. We need more Christian counselors who are like that. But so often, Christian counselors will have a predetermined outcome, and they're not making space for that. And then it does turn into conversion therapy. And so I would say if you hear your fellow clinician talking about that, please remind them you can be an affirming queer Christian who's also queer. You don't have to use that language as a way to say, and you have to tamper down your same-sex attraction. Even using the term same-sex attraction, I'm sorry, I only hear that in conversion therapy spaces. I don't hear that in clinical spaces. I don't even hear that in queer affirming Christian spaces. They just call themselves queer or gay, right? And that it's not an affront to their religion or their faith. Using the language of same-sex attraction, I really hope you call out each other. Is that conversion therapy language? Because that's what I'm hearing. And I think that's powerful because let's talk about court cases. The Colorado court case prompted the NCLR and Trevor Project to push legislation that changed the law. So now it is more neutral to viewpoint because there's no, quote, predetermined outcome. And so now we can have our court case protecting conversion therapy survivors. And they recognized, and in that meeting I was with them, they also called out, we recognize that conversion therapy survivors are very unlikely to call out and immediately take their therapist to court. Like what survivor of any trauma is going to be like, all right, I'm so empowered now and I'm so healed. I'm ready to confront the person who hurt me. No, it's going to take years. And so they increase the statute of limitations. And our goal is to remove statute of limitations. I work with survivors who, 40 years ago was their conversion therapy, and they've just kind of stuck with it and only now are healing. It can take a lifetime. So let's remove those statute of limitations. But for waving the magic wand, just call out your fellow therapists, use that term, SOGIECE, and just name it when you see it.
Earlier, you were talking about your preferred ways of looking at things and solution focused and ACT. How do you take that approach when the cause of the trauma, the cause of all of the stress is the very systems themselves? There doesn't seem to be a lot of personal control over a lot of these systems themselves. So how do you take that attitude into the work that you're doing?
Yeah, survivors have responded really well to a change in how we do things. We meet for 90 minutes each week in our support group, and we do make space for literally all of it. Maybe a little warning to your clinicians. If you ever want to trigger or have a very lively conversation with a conversion therapy survivor, ask them about the topic of forgiveness or what have you lost because of conversion therapy. You will get an earful. But we do make space for literally anything that comes up, no matter how deep and painful it gets. And then, last 10 minutes of our session or whatever we need to do, no matter how real we have acknowledged the pain is, we absolutely intentionally make room for queer joy. What are you doing to support yourself? These were a lot of really rough things you just talked about. We all share them. We all understand them. They're our lived reality. Now what? And it's that now what that I think we forget to ask ourselves because we're so steeped into that, like you talked about, lived reality of it's all day, every day. And so setting up those boundaries, creating that intentional, okay, I'm now going to give myself some queer joy. I'm going to read those queer books. I'm going to watch those queer shows. I'm going to watch Heartstopper and say this wasn't my reality, but boy, would love Heartstopper to have been my youth experience, right? Intentionality on queer joy has been very healing, specifically for conversion therapy survivors, because for us, that was dangerous, right? There are many of us where even dating is triggering. We know we're queer and we want to date, but gosh, it's just like the things that come up in your body just because you were told you went through steps to demonize even the thought of kissing someone or leaning into your queerness. That can actually be a trigger for you now. So now you have to work through that. So whatever works for you with your level of queer joy, being very intentional about that. I think that's why solution focus and ACT works for at least the way I do things, is because we acknowledge the hard stuff. We accept it. It's our lived reality. Like, and to pretend that the world is queer accepting is absolutely not our lived experience. Okay, now what? Let's get those strengths. Let's get those solutions, because that's really what we need.
You took a whole day off your regular job to hold the community. You run the survivor network on the side. you're doing survivor work as a survivor in a political moment that keeps re-injuring the people you serve? How are you taking care of yourself?
Oof. Um, Ask me in 5 minutes, right? uh, I, just because I always like to lean into realism before I also then lean into what I could do about it. Every single advocate that I know is actively trying to manage their burnout actively. So what I'm doing right now in this very moment, I've made sure that I do not advocate unless I have a very specific set time. I am not reminding myself that I'm a survivor and that I'm fighting the system unless it's this block of time for these many hours. And I know that I can see something on Facebook or I can have an idea on a book that I'm reading, but I have to be intentional about it. Otherwise, I'm going to feel like I am trying to bail out a sinking ship with a thimble, right? I cannot feel that. So I'm being very intentional about it. I'm also being very intentional about my queer joy. I am reading queer books. I am rereading every single book in the Murderbot Diary series because boy is that neurodivergent and queer and ab- oof. I am rereading it. I am sharing these books with my survivor friends, and I'm just reaching out with my survivor friends and checking in, and we're talking about things that have nothing to do about being a survivor, right? And we know that we met through the group, and we
Sure.
get it, but we're talking about other things, and that is incredibly healing. So that's what I'm doing.
I want to thank you so much for joining us once again today. Where can people find out more about the work that you're doing and how to support you?
Yeah, thank you. Conversion Survivor is our tag everywhere. So on our YouTube, if you want to watch us talking with a survivor who has a legal background, we're analyzing every bit of the case. So YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, everything is at Conversion Survivor. That's where CTSN is. Me personally, my handle is Can't Pray Me Away. I'm mostly on TikTok because it is a lot to be on every platform. And as you said, it's all volunteer. We're not paid. So yeah, conversionsurvivor.org is a great place to go. You can see our flag. You can see the things that we're doing. You can see that we created with other worldwide organizations a flag and International Day to End Conversion Therapy on January the 7th. So everything that we do can be on conversionsurvivor.org. You can donate. You can, I guess the other thing that I haven't mentioned yet, if the person you're working with feels seen by that label of conversion survivor, also let them know there's literally a flag, right? There's a
Mm,
lesbian flag, there's a bear flag, there's a gay flag, like all of our sub communities, there is literally a flag for us. And the queer joy that survivors have loved buying the pillows, buying the flags, buying the shirts, and then just wearing it, and then having this pride in, I survived. I survived. And look at the stats. Like, there's research going as high as 44% of the queer community is in some way, shape, or form a survivor. So it is a thing to be proud of. So conversionsurvivor.org is where you can find us. Your donations are very welcome and appreciated. And if nothing else, please just start seeing it.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what your donations go to and why it's so important to support organizations like this?
Yeah. Ironically, one of the biggest struggles we have is we're less known. People don't know that there's a support group where you can literally be in a room where people will nod their head to everything you talk about because they have lived it. They know absolutely what it's going through. And so some of the best ways that we've found to have publicity is to go to pride events. And those are expensive. And then it's emotionally taxing. And then if we don't happen to have survivors who know about us yet, who can man the booths, then that means we have to go. And then we have to pay our own way. And really hope that we can fund enough to reimburse us, right? So besides just our weekly costs, our insurance costs, all of our costs of just having the organization to run, publicity is the biggest need that we have. And that costs a lot of money. And hopefully when we can get as big as the Trevor Project, there are huge needs. Our survivors are disproportionately likely to be homeless, disproportionately likely to lose their jobs, disproportionately likely to deal with so many things that they need actual real therapy but can't afford it, right? So there's so many needs that we just simply can't address because we can't fund them. And it would be nice to be able to send free books, send free flags, and then eventually give them actual real therapy by therapists that we vetted. But just all of that takes time and management, and it's just too much to do.
We will include links to all of Sam's stuff in our show notes over at mtsgpodcast.com. And follow us on our social media. Join our Facebook group, the Modern Therapist Group, to continue on with this and other conversations. And until next time, I'm Curt Widhelm with Katie Vernoy and Samuel Nieves.
Thanks again to Powbox for sponsoring today's episode.
Powbox helps therapists send and receive email that's secure, HIPAA compliant, and easy for clients to open. Get $250 off at powbox.com with promo code MODERN.
If running your practice feels like too many moving parts, Simple Practice pulls scheduling, billing, and client communication into one place.
Start with a 7-day free trial, then get 50% off your first 3 months at simplepractice.com. The Conversion Therapy Survivor Network is working to support survivors everywhere and bring an end to conversion therapy. To learn more, donate, or access educational resources, visit conversionsurvivor.org. That's conversionsurvivor.org.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. Learn more about who we are and what we do at mtsgpodcast.com. You can also join us on Facebook and Twitter. And please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes.